We'll go again, try deep into the C array with Alberto Pianon and Carlo Piana from Array. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Carlo Piana, and my colleague Alberto Pianon. If they manage to bring up, oh, that fine, it works. I am a lawyer, and I'm also a board member to the Open Source Initiative. I've been chair of the board until, well, 10 days ago, and now I'm humbly only a board member. Today, I'm not starting with law, I'm starting with code. I'm not a tech guy, so this is something that happened in 2003. And this was an innocent typo introduced into Linux, actually version 2.5. And some of you can spot what the typo is. But the interesting thing is this was arguably the first supply chain attack on Linux. Luckily, and as the say goes, with enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, and so somebody spotted that and was fixed. The story is there. And that was 2003, 21 years ago. Open source was still sort of in its infancy, so you speculate, you can guess that situation has improved over the years. Well, not actually. If this thing works, okay. The situation is worse. And maybe you are familiar with this comic, XKCD, and this is a good portrait of how the technology in open source, and not only, because open source is everywhere, empowers everything, the technology is. Some remote guys in Nebraska maintaining, in a very obscure way, a very important piece of technology. So, 21 years later, we have attackers targeting a very under-maintained but critical piece of software, and thanks to social engineering, they were able to gain trust, to escalate, to gain the right to maintain, sort of. And they were able to insert a very clever insecurity that, if exploited, would create a major problem. So only because one very clever person, very attentive, spotted it, and by sheer luck, not because of us, evidently somebody will catch, only by sheer luck, we avoided Armageddon. And that was a few months ago. So we have a huge problem, a very large problem. And this problem is sustainability. Many of the important pieces of code in open source are under-maintained, underfunded, even large portions. So we're seeing people switching away from open source because they cannot sustain. And guess what? There are many projects run by one person, two persons, who cannot just cope. And so this is economic, but also a technical sustainability, because these people cannot just be sufficiently empowered, sufficiently funded, or have sufficient time or attention to maintain these people. So, by the way. So, in all this scenario, we have more legislation, more compliance, more things added to that. And life is getting more complicated, and we have CRA. So my colleague will run through CRA and get what makes and what adds to the life of developers, implementers, integrators, and makers of solutions using open source. Alberto?
So, CRA, other people talked about that before this morning, provides some essential requirements and plus some related obligations as to the design, the development, and the production of software. So the design should be made with security in mind, the development as well, and your production system, for instance, your build infrastructure should be secure against supply chain attacks, for instance. And also, another requirement is you need to be able to demonstrate that you have in place an effective program, an effective process to handle vulnerabilities in your code during the whole life cycle of your software product. And of course, as others mentioned this morning, there should be a conformity assessment that, depending on the risk level attached to the particular product category, could be self-assessment. There will be standards defined in the future, certification processes, third-party assessment, and so on. And yeah. That's okay. And in theory, we have time to comply because the CRA will come into force when it would be published, I think in the next weeks or days. But it will actually be applicable in 36 months after its publication. But as we will see later on, this is not too much time. So who must comply? Mainly manufacturers, importers, distributors, basically whoever puts into the European market a software product. So open source projects are in theory exempted unless they are directly monetizing. Then basically they are turning the project into a product and directly monetizing it. But if you are a manufacturer and you integrate open source projects in your product, you need to do a due diligence work on the components you integrate. And to this purpose, the recital 21 and the article 25 of CRA explicitly provide for voluntary assessment programs that and such programs should be initiated or even financed by manufacturers. And also, the manufacturers, so the open source users, integrators, will have an obligation to share the vulnerability fixes upstream, so to collaborate with the upstream project. And also, all open source stewards, like foundations that support the development of freedom open source software, providing, I don't know, infrastructure, governance, whatever, they will have some limited obligation as to security. A quick glance of the legal text. Free open source software has been defined as source code which is not only under an open source license, but also openly shared. This is to avoid any kind of open washing, companies pretending doing open source, but they don't openly share the code, even if the license is an open source one. Of course, this is the kind of definition of what is monetizing the software. And this includes also monetizing of single components. So if you're making available a single component in the software market, in the European market, you are bound to the CRA. And this is the crucial norm. So manufacturer should exercise due diligence when integrated components sourced from third parties, including open source. And this means and this is the recital 21 about the voluntary assessment programs that should be hopefully initiated and funded by manufacturers integrating open source projects in their product. Okay. Well, this is the definition of open source steward, but basically it's whoever provides support, maybe infrastructure, governance services to open source projects, typically foundation, but not only them. And yeah, the main thing about the whole subject of the subject matter we saw before is that it's not that open source is exempt As soon as an open source project turns into a product, someone has to take care of CRA compliance. The only thing is that the burden is shifted to the one who actually can handle it. So not the open source developers, not the open source maintainers, if they are not turning the open source project into a product, but it's shifted to the manufacturer. So someone has to fix, even if the project is open source, the manufacturer integrates it, needs to fix it if he wants to market it. So the 1 million question is CRA finally an opportunity to create the collaboration between the manufacturer, the integrator of open source software, and the open source project that live upstream. So the thing, are we able to use the CRA to force or to induce open source monetizers to do the same as the XZ case attackers did, but not for evil, for good? So first, if this works, okay, identify critical components, thanklessly maintained by some lonely volunteer in Nebraska, and push them to accept help and offer it by funding voluntary assessment programs, by fix vulnerabilities and share fixes upstream, fund maintenance, and all this in the open source way. So if there are, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 100 manufacturers that are integrated the same components, it wouldn't make sense that everyone does due diligence of the same components 100 of times. So there should be an open source model also for CRA compliance. So I leave the floor to.
So the title of our presentation was "Why it's too late," because it is too late. Although it's a 3 years time frame, because the resources either you have internally or if you have to go to the market and hire consultants, they will be too busy and will be there's limited resources will be scarce. So either you hide the dust under the carpet, but it's not a healthy solution, or you will be fine, you will be struggling to comply. So, but if you add to this the idea that you have to start and fix yourself the insecurity, apply the patches, apply the vulnerabilities, scan the CVE, do all the things, and do the due diligence, that would be simply too much for you, especially if you are an SME or SMB. So large company will probably cope with that, but small to medium, that would struggle a lot. So there is a need for a healthy ecosystem that the effort is put somewhere between the upper side of the chain and somebody and somewhat in before the final the outlet to the market. So this is a call for cooperation and for establishing some intermediate forces. It can be the foundations like the Linux Foundation, the Eclipse Foundation, but also other common efforts to go and hunt for the bugs, trying to find insecurities, and try to fix the mismatch between those who can actually fix upstream and those who make no sense, that take care of everything and multiply the effort by wasting much of the time and efforts at a time where you have also to comply and to change. It is time that the entire chain of value and the entire open source and the entire technology grows up. Because it's now we are in adult phase, we have to face our responsibility, and it's not a good idea just to shout to the cloud and say, "Oh, we have received this legislation, European legislator just imposing a new burden on us." We must act and we must try to find a clever and more efficient way to bring this. Creating consortia, making shared efforts, because this is also part of the open source, not just doing code, but also doing the overarching infrastructure that shifts the open source from an amateur or a very, very collecting to a professional industrial, which is now, but not everywhere. Thank you.